April 6, 1945, dawn over the East China Sea. The water looks metal flat from the destroyer's bridge, a pale sheet under a sky still holding on to night. 50 miles out from Okinawa, where the troop ships lie packed like apartment blocks, and the beachhead at Hagushi needs a constant lungful of ammunition and fuel. A Picket ship rides alone in the dark. Her crew has learned to measure time not by the clock, but by the sweep of the radar, the breath between returns, the hush after a radio click. Somewhere out there, the first Kikusui raid is drawing together. Japan's promise to throw whole squadrons of men straight at the fleet until the sea itself says no. If you're new here, subscribe to Warpath so you don't miss what happens next. Because the way these few ships held open the ocean is the line between an invasion breathing and an invasion drowning. By late March, the Americans understood the problem, in a way you feel in the stomach. Everything at Okinawa depends on flow. Landing craft, landing again, oilers feeding, hospital ships shuttling the wounded, carriers launching and recovering, and all of it needs time. Minutes, not hours. Kamikaze don't give minutes. They come low at wavetop height, where radar curves with the earth and can't quite see, where sunlight breaks on a canopy and a plane turns into a glint. So the answer is brutal and simple. Move your eyes outward and let your small ships stand in the wind. Plot a loose circle of radar picket stations, sometimes a destroyer with a couple of little rocket and gun ships, sometimes just the destroyer, roughly 50 to 100 miles from the island. Give the enemy something he has to stab through before he can reach the transports and the carriers. You are not making the attack go away. You are moving the bleeding edge. Inside the picket CIC, the air is cool and close. A dim red glow, headsets pressed in. The radar PPI blooming and fading like a heartbeat. The fighter director leans over the scope and works the picture into a story. Friendly caps. Identify with IFF. Unknowns. Label them bogeys and watch their course settle. Altitudes are guesses at first, then refined by reports. A voice in his ear giving Angels 1, Angels 2, the numbers meaning thousands of feet. The geometry lives in his hands. Bearing, range, intercept point, because there isn't time for elegance. He vectors the cap off a carrier group that's farther inside the ring. Bogey bearing 210, Angels 1, vector 270, Buster. No one in the room needs the math, but everyone is living inside it. If a plane hugs the sea, the radar sees him late. If the picket stands out here, that late becomes late enough. A mini-truth the crew would never phrase this way. The picket station is a clock. The moment the bogey comes above the radar horizon, the countdown starts. Cap must launch or divert, climb, accelerate, and cut off. If the first pair misses by a minute, the second pair must make up that minute with speed and angle. If the weather is lousy at 5,000 feet, maybe you keep the cap low and risk not seeing the second wave until the last blink. And between those calls, a voice circuit that can choke on its own urgency. Too many ships talking at once, call signs into static, two different controllers stepping on each other, a pilot asking fuel state and hearing only a hiss. The system works because dozens of imperfect pieces try at the same time. The sea has its say. A chop throws back spray that becomes mist, and mist becomes clutter, and the screen feels dirty. A picket crewman, eyes aching with the night's grain, counts his own heartbeat while the sweep makes another turn. The bridge watches for the impossible, the sliver that doesn't look right. And the gun crews stay limbered, magazines checked, safeties off. On the fantail, one of the little support ships, a stubby LCS with rockets stacked along her deck, slides in formation, her captain knowing too well what happens if a burning plane finds her. They came out here knowing they are bait, but it's not a cheap word. It means their job is to be a problem the enemy must solve first. Back inside, the fighter director hears the first radio call that isn't routine. Single bogey, low, fast. He marks it. Then another voice, different timbre, another station. Raid forming, multiple returns, Angels 1 to 2. The scope wakes up in a way that makes the skin prickle. A clump of light, then a clump behind it. Kikusui, the floating chrysanthemums, massed and coming in from the west. He calls for another section of fighters, then another. The carrier group inside the ring pushes planes his way, and he starts to stack them, timing their fuel states as if they were candles burning down. An F-6F pair checks in at 12,000 pounds remaining, plenty to fight and linger, and he puts them up, sun to the raid. A pair of Corsairs reports low on fuel. He uses them once, hard, then turns them home on a line that keeps them from crossing someone else's fire. The captain on the bridge doesn't look at the map as much as he listens. The ship turns slightly to comb the waves and give the gunners a better arc. It feels like disrespecting fate to point the bow straight at what's coming. The first dots on the horizon could be birds, then they could be nothing, and then the headset crackles with the sound men remember for a lifetime. The clipped confidence of a pilot who has found the enemy. Tally 2, low, committing. Somewhere way out on the rim, 2 specks roll and dive, and the whole ocean seems to hold a breath. There will be days in April when the names Bush and Colhoun are spoken in a mess deck at night. And there will be another week when Laffey's damage control parties carry hoses through smoke and swear they can hear the ship herself decide to live. May will turn tiny ships into legends and still let Bunker Hill burn enough to make everyone understand reduction isn't immunity. But right now, on this gray morning at the start of Kikusui, what matters is math you do with your nerves. Vectors go out. TP checks in. The fuel clocks start ticking down. And out beyond the radar's edge, where sea and sky meet in a seam of glare, a raid is building into the kind of weather only people make. By mid-morning, April 6th, 1945, the first wave doesn't look like a wave at all. It's a handful of timid blips, then a pause, then a handful more that move with purpose. Inside the destroyer's CIC, the air is cool, headsets squeaking as men shift on their feet. The fighter director steadies his pencil on the PPI rim. A clean return grows on the northwest edge, and then, as if the sea itself raises a shoulder, it fades under the radar horizon. He knows what that fade means. Low, skimming, using the curve of the world like a shield. Bogey bearing 315, Angels 1, he calls. Vector 270, Buster. A pair of Hellcats turns into the sun and starts their run. The Picket ship is alone enough that every voice feels personal. IFF pings clutter the picture, friendly squawks from other cap, a couple of strays returning on fumes, and somewhere beyond the neat rings of range and edge of static, like someone whispering through a door. The fighter director's geometry is half math, half faith. Low attackers erase the luxury of lead pursuit. You cut across their line, aim ahead into where they must go to reach the transports, and pray they keep coming on the line you drew in your head. He watches his Hellcats close. "You're high by 500, drop to Angels 1, he says, and the pilot hears it through a hiss, dips his nose, and loses sight of the target against the glare for a heartbeat that feels like a minute. The first pass is late by seconds, and seconds become miles when you're this low. The pair flashes past without a merge. The second section commits and finds one, firing, the gun camera stitching white against blue, a plane dropping in a ragged arc that ends in a smear of spray. On the bridge, the captain keeps one eye on the horizon and one ear on the net. The first physical proof arrives as a speck that refuses to be a bird. The gunnery officer counts under his breath, the way he always does, until the range clicks into his bones. The forward mounts open with a noise that breaks into your chest. Tracers walk the sky in lines that seem too clean for the chaos they serve. A Zero drops a wing to slip under the stream, and a 5-inch shell bursts ahead of him. And for a second, he is in two minds. Keep low and disappear from the radar, or climb to clear the shrapnel and paint himself bright. He stays low. The Picket's guns adjust, feeling for him the way a blind hand feels for heat. The radio circuit clogs. Another station is shouting over a calm controller, and a third voice snaps, "Break, break," in the clipped way that means somebody can see death right now. On the PPI, the raid coheres, not a scatter anymore, but a smear that thickens and forks. The fighter director throws every spare airplane onto the nearer fork, trusting the farther track is a feint, or will lose heart when it sees the first get ripped. A Corsair pair checks in with fuel tight. He uses them once and sends them home, cutting across a lane he knows will be filled with friendly gunfire in a few minutes. The weave of safety and danger is tight enough to pluck. The first hit feels like the ship sneezed. A plane takes fire, lifts a little, and its belly catches the aft superstructure in a hammering crash that is more shove than sound. Paint blisters, a small fire licks at canvas, and the damage control teams move with the sober speed of men who've practiced so often, their feet know the alleys better than their eyes do. The captain barely changes course. Every wobble steals a gun solution, and the ship settles into the task of not dying. A minute later, another comes in from the quarter, threading through tracer, catches a burst, hesitates, then steadies with the awful resolve of a man who has run out of choices. He hits near the waterline, the lights flicker. Somewhere below, someone tastes copper and thinks of nothing. The name USS Bush starts moving through the ether before everyone knows she's done. Hit, then hit again, then hit a third time when she is already bleeding out, and the ocean around her becomes a map of rafts and oil. The picket line doesn't move to sadness. There isn't time. But the voices change, and you can hear the will it takes to keep the picture going when your picture just tore. The rocket gunboat nearby, all those warheads racked like organ pipes, has lived in quiet terror of a hit since she sailed. Today she gets lucky, and luck feels like a strategy when it holds. Colhoun comes up hard to help. That's the other part of picket duty that no one prints on charts. You are never just one ship. You are the next ship that comes when the first goes down. She slides into the oil slick with boats out, the crew heaving men whose faces look the same shade as the sea. The cap above is busy with a second wave that learned from the first. Lower, later turns, sun behind them, and the fighter director's voice is hoarse now, not from fear, but from the kind of attention that burns your throat. Bogey 210, Angel 0.5, cut across, he says, and the pilot, hearing only fragments, chooses his own line and makes a kill that saves a transport he'll never see. It doesn't save Colhoun. The sky remains too full, the angles too tight, the seconds too few. She gets struck and keeps moving, then is struck again. Someone in a boat looks up between strokes and sees a glint with a mind and yells without words. The ship staggers, rights herself, staggers again. In the lull that follows the last impact, there is time to notice the smell, burned oil and wet cordite, and the particular quiet of a gun mount when its crew is gone from it. Rescue ships will come. They always do. But by evening both Bush and Colhoun are names read softly at different mess tables, and the anchorage inside the ring is still busy, still intact, because 2 destroyers made the first payment on the day's bill. Night will spread a blanket over the wreckage and let the ocean keep its dead. The tally is taken without speeches. Fighters lost, fighters saved, ships damaged, ships gone, and how many planes never got near Hagushi because they were forced to fight 50 miles too soon. No one believes the line is perfect. Every man who stood a watch today understands what reduction looks like when you are the surface it reduces against. Tomorrow, the ring will be manned again, and the geometry will start again. And somewhere in the east, a pilot will test the edge of the radar horizon with the nose of his plane and think he's found a seam. He has for a little while. Then the picture wakes, the vectors go out, and the trade, time for blood, resumes. May 3rd, 1945, late afternoon on a gray sea, the kind that swallows distance. The picket line has been up for a month, and men can feel the shifts in their bones. You learn the light in every hour, the way wind lays down the chop, how the screen grows noisy when rain veils the horizon. The destroyer's PPI shows the weather more than the world, smears of clutter, little ghosts that come and go. In that kind of light, a threat can hide in plain sight. The fighter director thumbs sweat off his pencil and works the picture anyway. Bogey bearing 185, Angels 1, Vector 210, Buster. He doesn't say what he's thinking. Low means late, late means seconds, and seconds are the whole game. Off the beam, the little gun and rocket ships hold formation, stubby silhouettes with decks stacked high. The men on an LSMR joke with the fatalism of specialists. We carry a forest of fireworks and park ourselves where sparks like to land. Everyone knows the risk, one hit in the wrong place and a ship turns into a match head. But they earn their place here. When a raid breaks into pieces, those rocket rails and fast-firing guns can fill the sky with lines that turn angles into choices the enemy can't make. Today, though, the lines won't be enough. The name comes in over the net like a cough. Little. USS Little on station, steady and ready. And then the air above her thickens with the presence of things you can't see on a chart. Tired pilots, good and bad vectors, a seam where 2 radar stations' coverage barely touches. Sea-skimming planes ride that seam, popping up just enough to keep bearings honest, then dropping again so ground clutter hides their bellies. The cap is there, but position and timing are fighting them. When you're low and fast, a 5-second mistake isn't a small error. It's a whole failed intercept. On the bridge, the captain keeps his ship's head a point off what he wants, feeding his gunners a clean horizon, not masking one battery with the other. The first hint is the way a lookout stops breathing. Contact, port quarter, low. The 5-inch mounts snap, the 40s chatter, the 20s saw at the world. You can measure the range by the way tracers flatten and rise. One plane comes in, nose down, in a way that reads as decision. The ship catches the blow high, metal shrieking into a voice that makes everyone on deck feel small. Damage control teams move with the resigned speed of men who understand that the second fight starts after the first one ends. Little lives, long enough to give and take again, and then she doesn't. The sea closes over a name, and the line makes room for the gap she leaves. By morning of May 4th, the weather is mean and complicating. Wind throws spray high enough that radar sees a fake horizon. The picture loses depth. The fighter director leans in closer, as if proximity could grant clarity. "Bogey Group 170, Angels Unknown," he calls, and that last word carries the weight of everything they've learned. Unknown means low until proven otherwise. Corsairs take the vector, slip down under the scud, and fight the world's worst angle, trying to see past the very sea they must protect. Morrison hears the same call on her own speaker, and the bridge answers with calm that isn't false so much as it's practiced. The gunnery officer bites a word in half because there isn't time for whole ones. Morrison's fight is short and savage. A raid splits and recombines and splits again, some decoys clean, some very real. Cap claws down 2, maybe 3. One attacker gets tunneled toward a seam between stations, exactly where the blind spot is largest when the sea is up. He slips through, razor low, engine sound arriving a fraction behind the shape. The first hit takes the ship in a way that drops the deck under your feet. The next takes something vital away, steering or steam, and the third ends the argument. Men go to the rail without orders and search the water, because that's the only thing left to do when a hull has given all it can. Luce dies under the same weather, which is the truth no tally sheet can write down. Sometimes the enemy is brave and skilled, and sometimes the sky and the sea conspire. A wave masks a plane at the exact second a fire control solution would have settled, and when the nose rises into view, the closing speed is a fact no courage can erase. The Picket circle holds because other ships slide into the holes, because pilots burn the last of their fuel on one more pass, because a controller risks a vector that brings two friendly pairs too close and trusts discipline to keep them separated by angels. It isn't neat. It is the furthest thing from neat. Some of the undertold truths surface in the mess line that night. How voice circuits clog when 2 raids and 3 rescues share air. How IFF can lie by omission. No ping at all when a friend's set is shot out. Forcing gunners to withhold a shot they want badly to take. How ashore fighter direction, slowly growing as airstrips on Okinawa become usable, can shorten the chain, put eyes closer to the horizon line, and still leave a seaborne controller to make the last hard call at the last hard second. How fatigue sits in your shoulders like an extra pound per hour until you forget the feel of not being tired. A small reveal that feels like a miracle. In the middle of this, the transports still unload. Hagushi still breathes. A freighter captain who has never seen a radar scope in his life, never knows that 2 destroyers have gone down to buy him this hour of cranes and cargo nets. On the rim, another Picket crew rotates off watch, helmet lines pressed into their hair, and steps into a compartment that smells like hot metal and old coffee. The fighter director lays his pencil down and flexes the hand that has been holding geometry together all day. He doesn't permit himself the thought, but it lives in him anyway. We moved the fight 50 miles out, and the price is due at 50 miles out. Tomorrow, the line will write the same equation again and hope that the answers, imperfect, costly, are still enough. May 11, 1945, first light smears the sea into glass, and 2 destroyers ride a Picket station that feels like the top of the world. USS Evans and USS Hugh W. Hadley sit far from the anchorage, out where the ocean is clean of ships and heavy with intent. The men have the look of a month's worth of broken sleep. You learn to take your rest in thin slices, to hear through static, to know the difference between a real return and a smear of sea clutter just by how your skin tightens when the sweep comes around. The first calls are modest, almost polite. A single bogey, low, then 2, Angels 1. The fighter director in Hadley's CIC notes them down with the tight script of a man who knows he'll need to read his own writing in a hurry. He's got caps stacked and cycling, some coming in from carriers, some from ashore, corsairs lifting from new fields on Okinawa, ashore controllers feeding bearings, afloat controllers stitching the picture together when the circuits get crowded. Bogey bearing 210, Angels 1, Vector 270, Buster. The response is crisp, but the air is already busy, and you can hear the overlap. 2 voices on one net, a third breaking in to report fuel tight, a fourth cutting off the rest with a clipped break break that tells you a pilot just saw something that matters. The picture fattens. What looked like dribs and drabs becomes a raid with a spine, multiples coming in different heights, some true, some feints. A small reveal you only notice when you live here. When raids begin to stack, the sea grows crowded with nothing you can see. Frequencies jam, IFF sets drop out when a friendly takes a hit, and now you're guessing at a spec's allegiance. The radar horizon plays its old trick. If a bogey ties himself to the waves, you see him late, then lose him, then see him again a mile closer. Those lost seconds let a bad idea get good. Evans and Hadley don't wait to be told what they are. The 2 ships spread, making a shallow V, giving their guns clean arcs and their controllers 2 angles on the same picture. Off their quarters, a couple of LCSs settle into place, small, pugnacious silhouettes stacked with rockets, and the kind of men who swear they're only short on height, not stomach. Everyone knows the math of those decks. A rocket magazine hit wrong turns a ship into a flame no hose can reason with. They sit there anyway. The first pass works like a rehearsal that refuses to end. Hap rips down out of the sun, smashes the head of the nearest flock, and scatters the rest. Hadley's 5-inch mounts cut in with proximity fuses, bursts bursting into a geometry that tells low flyers to choose between rising into shrapnel or burrowing into a world where the horizon protects you and hides you too. One plane climbs, gets flayed, and falls in a wet flare. Another stays low, threads tracer that looks like a picket fence built in the air, and keeps coming. Gun crews talk in half words and numbers. Hold, now, now! And the 40s hammer at angles learned the hard way. The first attacker going for Hadley breaks apart under fire. Pieces skip the water and vanish. Then the second act arrives without a cue. More returns bloom. The fighter director looks at his timing board and sees the trap. Cap windows are closing. The pair you really want up high has to go home on fuel. The pair you can keep low is perfectly placed for the wrong group. He gambles, sends the low pair slicing across to buy 10 seconds where the raid bends. Cut across, he tells them, and trusts that they'll read what he can't say in time. They do. A 0 blinks into being, dives to wave height, and vanishes under the nose of a corsair that can't follow without drinking the sea. Evans takes a hit that feels like a shrug from something larger than weather. A kamikaze bores in through a web of tracer, clips the superstructure, and explodes in a way that makes direction meaningless for a few beats. Smoke leaps, the ship staggers. Down below, damage control parties talk like carpenters, wooden words, short and exact, plugging holes, venting smoke, rigging hand pumps, making a path where there wasn't one a moment ago. Steering hiccups, then comes back. Ammunition counts drop to a part of the brain nobody likes to visit. You can almost hear the numbers reducing. 5-inch, 80 rounds, 40 millimeter, down a belt, 20 millimeter, reload now. The gunnery officer doesn't say, almost empty. He says, steady. Hadley moves like a boxer cutting the ring. She turns into the next raid, not away, because the only thing worse than a straight-on shot is a broadside you can't bring to bear in time. Cap tears another mouth out of the wave of planes. Still they come. One drops a bomb that doesn't kill the ship so much as wound the day. Systems flicker, aft guns go to local control. The CIC keeps its voice steady. Bogey 180, Angels 1, Vector 210. A pilot comes back through the hiss with Tally 1, and everyone lets out a breath they won't remember taking. The outnumbered stand becomes the day's whole story. Hadley absorbs more strikes, shudders, fights fires that want the whole ship, loses power, then finds a way to move water against the fire's mind. Somewhere amidships, a bulkhead starts to warm, and men get ahead of it with a hose line and a prayer made of practice. The LCS off her quarter adds a skein of tracer that forces a last-ditch attacker to jink at the wrong instant. The plane hits the water short and throws up a wall that slaps the ship like an insult. Evans, hurt and burning, still throws a battery's worth of will into the air. Between them and the cap that refuses to quit, the line does not fold. When it eases, it doesn't feel like victory, just the absence of collapse. The tally comes later and sounds unreal even to the men who made it. How many downed or diverted, how many guns jammed and unjammed, how many near misses that count as saves. Hadley floats, battered into a shape nobody drew, and keeps her people. She will be written up for a presidential unit citation. But there is no such language in the moment, only the quiet that follows a day that tried to erase you and failed. Out toward the carriers, smoke boils over Bunker Hill, a dark pillar that says, the raiders still find their way through often enough to hurt. The Picket ships have bought time again, and the price is still written on their decks. Tomorrow, somebody will stand this station with fewer hands and the same job. And a few weeks earlier, on a different gray morning, there was a ship called Laffey that refused to sink, an old lesson this new day has just learned again. April 16th, 1945, late morning, and the destroyer rides a picket station, like a nail sticking out of a board. USS Laffey is far from the comfort of numbers, with a couple of small escorts around her and a sky that won't make promises. The first siren cuts the air thin. In the CIC, the fighter director works the scope with a pencil that's more metronome than tool. Returns bloom, split, disappear under the curve of the world, then rise again as glints that don't belong to birds. Bogey 170, Angels 1, Vector 200, Buster. Cap moves to meet them. Out on deck, gun crews settle into the kind of quiet that feels like prayer without words. The attack comes layered, as if someone is testing every seam at once. Dive bombers up the middle, torpedo planes down low, singles slashing at angles. Laffey chooses offense because there's nothing else that works. She turns to unmasked guns, throws 5-inch bursts into the sky that make a geometry Kamikaze hate, and lets the 40s and 20s saw bright lines through the morning. A plane drops a bomb that cracks like the world changing its mind. Another comes in low, with a certainty that makes men clench their teeth. He dies short, a white blossom on the sea. The next one doesn't. He hits high, tears open steel and air, and the ship answers with the ugly music of things that don't want to break, but do. Damage control runs on muscle memory and faith. Hoses snake through smoke. Men drag lines where the deck slopes wrong. Someone re-rigs a phone circuit with hands that won't stop shaking. The bridge calls a course change so slight it would look like nothing on a chart, but it opens an arc that feeds a mount the shot it needs. Laffey gets struck again, then again, enough to tilt her into a shape that doesn't fit anyone's drawing. She should not still be fighting, yet her mounts keep speaking in that industrial thunder that means we're not done. Cap tears into the next wave and shreds its front rank. The survivors come on because survival isn't their calculus. Another plane smashes into the after section. Fire runs uphill like a wild thought. Somewhere in that noise, the CIC stays steady. Bogey 200, Angels 1, Vector 215. The voice is human and flat, and it holds a room together. The LCS tucked in close throws a stitched curtain of tracer that forces an attacker to twitch a second early and meet a shell burst he'd have lived past if he'd stayed true. It's all that kind of math, seconds, inches, tiny angles, stacked into a day nobody forgets. By the time the sky runs out of airplanes, Laffey is a monument to refusal. She has holes in places ships shouldn't have holes and fire in compartments that shouldn't know fire, but she floats. The men who saved her don't feel like heroes. They feel like workers who finished the shift. It would be a cleaner story if that iron grace stopped everything. It doesn't. May 11th, the picture repeats with a different outcome. Far inside the ring, Bunker Hill rides the wind with the easy confidence of a task force carrier on station. The air smells of avgas and warm paint. Then 2 planes make it through, low, masked by sea and timing, and the plain bad luck that lives in war. In seconds, the flight deck belongs to fire. Pilots run with their helmets in their hands. The ship staggers, rights, staggers again. She survives because crews do not accept any other outcome, because hoses meet flame and bulkheads hold. But the lesson is cruel and exact. The picket line reduces. It doesn't erase. By June, there is a rhythm to the work. Ashore fighter direction grows on newly carved airfields. Afloat controllers keep stitching the edges where ground sets can't yet see. IFF gets better, then worse when holes appear in the wrong places. Voice circuits remain a living thing, crowding and clearing with the day's heartbeat. The little rocket ships at the stations carry their fear and do their job. Knowing a lucky hit can write them into memory for reasons nobody wants. The destroyer list, Bush, Colhoun, Little, Morrison, Luce, reads like a ledger paid in steel and names. The balance against that debt is a beachhead that never suffocates, and a fleet that keeps its carriers launching. A small, stubborn reveal hides in the daily logbooks. Fewer breakthroughs into Hagushi, fewer LSTs burning at anchor, fewer hospital ships forced to move under fire. The picket line takes the chaos far from the center and spends it out there, where Cap can chew at it, where one ship's stubbornness can make a difference the size of a harbor. Imagine the same months with no ring, raids arriving over the anchorage with seconds to spare, gunfire erupting across rows of transports tied to the shore, a logistics lung punched again and again. The casualty map changes. The invasion timetable stretches, maybe breaks. Instead, the line holds, imperfect and human. The men who stood it don't talk like strategists. They remember the feel of headset foam gone rough with salt, the taste of burned insulation, the way a 5-inch mount shudders when it's hot enough to smell like iron and lightning. They remember the radio calls that sounded like a pilot swallowing fear and spitting out duty. Tally 2, committing, and the craft of turning vectors into saves. They remember how a destroyer is both weapon and home, and how you steer a home into harm because that's where the work is. When the last Kikusui dwindles and the line draws inward, ships limp and strong together, the sea looks like any other sea. Only the names make it different. The reckoning is simple enough to write but hard to carry. By moving the risk forward, the fleet bought room to breathe. The price lived on picket decks, in CICs, at guns, in repair lockers. Laffey's survival isn't an exception, it's a statement. Bunker Hill's smoke isn't a failure. It's a reminder that no wall is perfect when the enemy keeps choosing death as a tactic. What endures is the quiet competence that filled the space between detection and impact, the seconds taken back from the horizon and given to men who could use them. This video's content has been compiled from multiple sources. If anything is inaccurate or needs correction, please comment below. See you next time.